Welcome to our community. Susie Thomas with you this morning. Happy to welcome Steve Harriman. He's author of Char's Gift. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Susie. How are you?
Doing well. How are you doing? How have you managed to get through this crazy time we've been going through?
Yeah, it's been interesting to combine this along with dealing with the loss of my wife. It's been a challenge, but God has been faithful to me. So
Yes, and you have our sincere prayers. That's one thing the community of faith can certainly do, is hold each other up when we're going through horrible times. Talk to me about Char's Gift.
Well, it started, I can tell you the backstory, I guess. In 1995 on Easter Sunday, way back in 95, Char and I were getting ready to go to church, and she fell to the floor with a grand mal seizure. And so I had, when she came out, it was like 5 minutes long. It was very frightening, and when she finally kind of came out of it, she laid down, and I was on the phone with 911, and then she went into a second one, and then I got really nervous.
Yeah.
The next thing I remember was chasing the ambulance down the highway at about 85 miles an hour, and it didn't seem fast enough. It just was that urgent of a situation. And so when they were done doing tests, they found something suspicious and then did an MRI. And I remember the day that the surgeon's assistant walked into the room with film and slapped it up against the window, and you could see this massive golf ball-size tumor sitting there, and our whole life just changed at that point. And they finally did surgery on that following Wednesday and said it was urgent that she had to have it or else it would take her life. And so we got through that miraculously, and Char came home on the following Monday, if you can believe that.
No.
And so our world was turned upside down, and then Char got the call from the pathologist, and they said, yes, it was malignant. We didn't know it was until that point. And Char really, she sobbed about that, and she finally said to me, she said, Steve, I just, I can't believe I have to say it, that I have cancer, and brain cancer. And eventually, she actually tried to go back to her job and wanted her life to go back to normal. But it was anything but that. And the doctors had given her 2 years to live and said that her life would be limited. But I can tell you, the reason I wrote the book is because God had a completely different plan than the doctors. And she lived for 24 years.
Wow.
And that, in and of itself,
24 when you're given 2 years to live.
Yes. And so, I think that in itself is, kind of a newsworthy kind of event in life. But the reason I wrote the book was because of what Char did as a result of it. That was the amazing part.
Yes.
And she had always wanted to help people, but she never could quite figure out how and when and who. And she always talked about that. I just really want to serve the Lord and help him, but she just couldn't quite figure out her place until this happened. And she actually wrote about this in a story that we published, and she had said, because of the brain cancer, that God has given me the desires of my heart. And that's a big, bold statement to say that, but she looked at it as a blessing because all of a sudden, we were going to cancer support groups. That was our social life. And every time we would walk away from those, she would always be thinking about all the other people and what she wanted to do to encourage them. So Char was the ultimate encourager, and so she would, I can give you an example. There was one day I remember she drove her little Dodge White Neon. This is after her brain tumor. And she drove into town and had visited 5 different people that she learned about who had cancer. And she visited a veteran's home, a nursing home, people in their own homes and in the hospital. She would bring them roses, read scripture to them, hold their hand, and pray with them. So she was kind of an angel on the earth.
Wow.
Girl. And so that was kind of and out of that, we formed a ministry
Yes.
called Hope Through the Storm, and ended up publishing the stories of other people, how, with God's help, that they were able to get through cancer at the time. And that little publication was just an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and God took that and ended up getting it as a quarterly publication in 48 states and 11 countries. So we, were very blessed to do that. And then 16 years later, Shar had a recurrence. We thought we were home free.
Yeah.
And came back in the same area. And over the last several years, Shar's had multiple recurrences. So she ended up having 5 major brain surgeries in that 24-year period. Oh. And when she recovered again and again and again, we decided we kind of had to stop the ministry at one point. And then we started it up again and expanded it to anyone with any illness or disability, which was a very big step. And so from that, we decided to have what we called Hope Conferences. And those were something that we felt strongly about offering for free to anyone with any illness or disability. And so we did. And I'm a big dreamer. I always aim high because I always figure, with God, all things are possible. Yes. And so I was able to get a hold of Laura Story. We had kind of a common connection there because her husband had a brain tumor, and that's where Blessings came out of.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. So Laura, I became a concert promoter. Isn't that crazy? But we had Laura at our conference, and I also got Tony Campolo to come.
Wow, I love him.
And people just said, Steve, how in the world, you're just this little grassroots effort, how in the world did you do that? And I said, well, I always aim high when it comes to God. Why not?
Yeah.
And Laura had said to me afterwards that she had spoken in front of hundreds of churches and, sung before hundreds of churches, but she had never done it in front of a group like this that was all people with all these illnesses and disabilities.
Wow.
There was 53 different illnesses and disabilities represented there.
Oh,
it was a remarkable event. And so it was kind of the pinnacle of what we were doing, and Shar actually spoke at our first one, and I had a lump in my throat because here's a girl who was a 2-time brain tumor survivor, and believe me, when you're going through it, you just cannot conceive of the idea that you could be in a place like this all of a sudden, and that Shar would be speaking in front of people. I mean, I thought I was going to lose her. And so God really took her life, and she was a shining star, I guess I would say, in this world. And she really shined the love and compassion of Jesus to people. I think that's ultimately why I wrote the book. I think the story was too big, and seeing what God is able to do in the most difficult storms is really why I wrote the book.
Isn't it something? What were the doctors' reactions when suddenly 24 years later, their prediction obviously was very, very wrong, even though she continued to battle it off and on in that time?
Well, we had an oncologist who's a Christian, too. He used to say to her, Shar, you have to have all 3 legs of the tripod to stand, mind, body, and soul. And he was always just amazed by her. All the doctors, Shar was such a light, even amidst all these storms. She was always thinking about the other person. It was just what, she couldn't get enough of helping people. She was addicted to it.
But
I think she really lived the scripture that Jesus said was, it's more blessed to give than receive.
Yeah.
And Shar just lived that.
Yeah, that fed her. But interesting that it was as she's praying, sometimes he does not answer our prayers the way we expect him to at all. If she's praying for a purpose and then this happens, but that illness gave her clarity, and yet God carried her right through it to carry through with the purpose. How many lives she then was able to have an impact upon, and you got to see that one after another.
Yes, and that's what was so amazing to me, and I feel like, I guess when I look at, the qualities of Jesus, Shar really shined in that area, but she, she didn't do it with a lot of fanfare, and she didn't, try to just preach to people. She would show them the love of Jesus, not just tell them. I think that's a big part of her ministry.
Talk to me about that difference. What did that look like? How did she do that?
Well, I think when someone takes the time to, I'll give you an example. There was, and there were several places. I mean, she was even helping the homeless shelters. We would bring gift bags down to them. We called them hope bags. And she would fill them with, not only just warm socks and things, but she would put scriptures in there and different things and visit those people. But then she would also, I'll give you an example. There was a time where her mom was going through Alzheimer's, and she was on one of those Alzheimer's wings of a nursing home. And we had gone to a Christmas party there and always realized that there were so few people who visited. It was very sad. And they did a Christmas party where they wanted the children of the residents to come and bring a gift. And Shar had asked the staff, well, what about those who don't have any family? What do you do for them? And sadly, they said, we don't really get them gifts.
Oh.
And Shar found out that there were 7 women there who didn't have any immediate family. And she put together some gift bags, and she wrote homemade Christmas cards and put scriptures in them. And then when we went to the party after seeing her mom, she visited each one of these 7 women, brought them this, read the card to them, held their hand, and prayed with them. And it always struck me, it was so interesting. It led to a neat story. Johnny Erickson Tata, Shar was a big surprise puller on me. She would always do these good-hearted surprises on me all the time in our marriage, and I wanted to get her back. And so I got a hold of Johnny's assistant. Shar always looked up to her and read most of her books. And so I said to her, here's my idea. And her assistant said, well, tell me more about Shar. And so I kind of shared that story about the nursing home. And 15 minutes later, she said, Johnny, would love to do a surprise call. And so the next day, we set it for 5 o'clock. And Shar was on the phone with her girlfriend. And I thought, you better hang up or I'm going to pull the cord. And she hangs up at 1 minute to 5 and starts asking me about how my day went. And then the phone rang. And she looked at the caller ID, and it said California. And she goes, oh, this must be a telemarketer or for you. I said, no, trust me, you're going to want to take that call. And so those two talked for a good half an hour, and they prayed with each other. And I thought in my heart, here's, for me, 2 of the world's great encouragers talking on the phone together. My job here is done.
Yeah, truly.
And those 2 did become friends. And I wrote about that in the book. It's a really special relationship. They never had a chance to meet in person, but Shar would always send Johnny flowers. Johnny would send back these wonderful letters of encouragement to Shar, and they had a very special friendship.
So amazing.
Days before Shar passed away, she had a 5th brain tumor, and it was so devastating. We had to go to rehab for 2 months, physical rehab for the first time, and she had to learn to walk again and talk again, and she made it all the way back until Memorial Day last year, and she had a series of just devastating seizures, and God took her home so quickly. But the day before she passed away, I had let Johnny know, and Johnny sent Shar a phone video, and she sang "Be Still My Soul" to her. And so
beautiful.
It was so special, and I actually went out and visited Johnny in August, and I said, I have to deliver a hug from Shar to you. And she said, you're willing to fly all the way to Agoura Hills, California from Michigan? I said, yep, I am. And so we spent a wonderful time, and she looked me in the eye, and she asked me a question no one had ever asked me before. She says, tell me in your own words, in one sentence, what makes Shar so special? I said, wow. I said, you know what? I think she always thought about the other person first, Johnny. And I'll share you one example. After Shar's 2nd brain surgery, she was recovering in the hospital. And it's a very huge thing to go through, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I can't.
I talk about it so quickly on a timeline, but it's just devastating.
Yeah.
Well, Shar was recovering, and she looked over at me one afternoon and she said, "Steve, did you ever think that maybe I'm not in this hospital for me?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "I just sometimes think that maybe God has me here to help somebody else." And I didn't know what to think. I thought
Wow.
maybe she just was a little tired, or
Who
So I had
thinks
gone to get a
that
cup.
way?
Yeah, I had gone to get a cup of coffee, and when I came back to the room, here's Shar with her arm around the nurse, praying with her.
Oh, my.
And so I walked out quietly, and then later on I asked her, I said, "What was that all about?" She says, "Well, I had asked this girl, about her life, and she started crying. And she told me that she had just lost her mom a week ago to breast cancer. And this was her first day back on the job."
Mm.
And so I thought she was right. Shar was right.
Yeah.
And over through the book, amidst all the surprises that she would pull on me, and there's a lot of fun in this book, but
Yeah,
there's
good.
a lot of deep moments too, as you can imagine.
Yes.
And so I'm just trying to paint a picture to you of who Shar was, and I think why it was worth writing a book, because I really feel that there's people out there in need of hope, and Shar was a shining example that you can have hope and joy, even amidst these kinds of storms in life.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about, I think the secret she had was always trying to think about the other person, sending them, if she had to be stuck at home sometimes in recovery, she still would call people and check up on them, and she just got so much joy from that it was, I think it was a gift from God, really, to her.
Mm. Speaking with Steve Harriman, author of Shar's Gift. We'll be back after these words. You're listening to Our Community. Welcome back to Our Community, speaking with author Steve Harriman. He's written Shar's Gift, a beautiful tribute to Shar. Steve, being around Memorial Day of last year that she did pass, always those firsts are so hard. How have you gotten through this past year?
Well, I think it started with, I wasn't planning on writing a book, actually. And when I gave the eulogy, I gave the eulogy to Shar in June of last year, and I shared stories with people. And I think they weren't prepared to be laughing about how we first met at a restaurant. I was a busser and she was a waitress, and people came up to me afterwards and just said, "Wow, that was so powerful. You should write a book about all this." And it's a cliche, and so I actually did. It was actually on the way home from that flight to visit with Johnny that I started writing it, and it became cathartic to me. As hard as it was, though, because I felt there were days where I was just hitting the wave head on by remembering all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I can safely say that, assuredly say that, I felt God so strongly with me as I was writing this. It was a very powerful connection. And he was really giving me the encouragement to just say, "You know what, Steve, just share from your heart. Don't think too much about it." And so I did. And I didn't want it to become a book on, Steve's book on how to grieve. It was more sharing how we saw God working through all of these storms. And there was many, and it was a long journey. And so in the aftermath now, the latest thing I've been doing, I'm fortunate enough to live 15 minutes away from the shores of Lake Michigan.
Nice.
So I have been driving out there. One night I was watching too much COVID-19 stuff on TV, and it's very depressing after a while. And I felt a calling to go out to the lake, and I hadn't been there for years. Shar and I couldn't go through all of this. It was a very difficult thing to be able to do. And so I had gone out there and realized it was the first time I'd ever been out there without her. And that brought me to tears one night. It was 37 degrees out, I remember. It was in March. And there was a dune climb stairway at Hoffmaster State Park. And I climbed that stairway, and I had such good memories of Shar. And it was a cloudy evening, and the sky broke open, and the most gorgeous sunset was staring me in the face.
Mm.
And it felt like I was looking into heaven, and I felt God speak to my heart. And he said, Steve, Char's here with me. She's doing great.
Mm.
She's doing better than you are right now. Trust me. But it was a turning point for
Such
me
an assurance.
because I was always looking back at like the last week of Char's life or those last few days and hours, and it's so difficult to go through. And I was hung up on that, and I think he was telling me, she's okay.
Yeah.
She's alive and well.
Yes.
And look forward now. I still have work for you to do.
She's not hung up. She's not hung up on those last days and hours. That's way in her past.
No more cancer, no more seizures, no more
100%
pain.
health.
And so I've never thought of heaven more than I ever have now.
Right.
I mean, I think about it all the time now because it's become so real to me. I know that she's alive.
Yes.
You know, just like with Jesus. I mean, I've had these walks where I'm walking out through the woods to the lake shore and walk the beach by myself. I mean, ultimate social distancing place.
Yes.
And on those walks, I'm just praying out loud. And, you know, you don't always have to pray with your eyes closed. And I have these conversations and this wonderful fellowship with the Lord like I've never had before. It's a very peaceful time, but your mind is so clear, and he can really speak to you when you don't have all the distractions.
Mm.
I highly recommend it if you can get out and take some time. It's not easy to do, but
so true.
And so I've been having a lot of neat thoughts, and special things have come into my mind, into my heart from him. I know they're from him, and he just keeps assuring me that, you know, someday you're going to be with her, and she's doing great. So don't worry about her anymore. You know, as a caregiver, you become that role. You know, you're the ultimate defender of your spouse, or you know, in my case with Char, and it just it's so hard to have that taken away from you.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have to define who is Steve 2.0 going forward.
Right.
And so God has given me the thought that, and I always struggled sometimes, you know, when you go through something like this, Char was always stronger, had a much stronger faith than I did. And I always struggle with, why do we have to go through this? Why, Lord, are we suffering? And she didn't see it that way. She saw purpose in it.
Mm.
And so through the book, I think you see me grow as a person. And, you know, you see Char helping me along and God strengthening me. I didn't even realize it until I wrote it.
The title itself is so interesting. Char's gift. What is the gift? Is that something that she received or something she gave, or both?
It's both. Mm-hmm. It's actually both. The way I look at it, as far as initially, I look at that gift is for Char when she accepted the Lord into her heart, that gift of Jesus, and ultimately that gift of eternal life. But I also think of it this way, that, you know, though the doctors gave her 2 years to live, and that God had this other plan, he gave her the gift of time. And what she, you know, what she did with that time, she kind of became a gift to other people that way by sharing, you know, the love and compassion of Jesus with those in need, especially those in need of encouragement and hope.
Yes.
And that included, I mean, people facing cancer and brain tumors and other illnesses. And, you know, like I said, she would visit people in their homes and hospitals, and it was just a remarkable thing to watch. She couldn't get enough of it. And so I think that gift, she kind of, in a way, I say she kind of re-gifted that gift from God. She re-gifted it to the world and shared that kind of thing. I think that's such an important part of the Christian walk, that it's not just in words but in action.
Mm-hmm.
And Char, you know, lived that and set an example for me and for other people. And so I felt, writing this book, I wanted to share her legacy.
What would you want us readers to have as the major takeaway?
I think that Char would say it best this way, that there is hope. And that word sometimes is very generic, and people don't know how to wrap their mind around it. But I think we all go through our own storms and struggles. It doesn't have to be a brain tumor. I remember people would come up to her and they would sometimes share their issues, their problems, and say, but that doesn't compare to what you're going through, Shar. And she would stop them right there and said, don't even do that. She says, your problems are just as real as mine. They may be different, but they're still, real things that you're having to deal with. So don't undermine those, and say that I have it worse than you.
Yeah.
And so she would try to show them the path that when you care for other people, when you take the time to rise above your circumstances and see God's purpose in it, then you can have joy. I mean, you really can. When you look at it on paper, you would say there's no reason that Shar should have any hope or joy when you're just constantly knocked down and, why is life so cruel to you? And you can have every reason to be angry and bitter, but Shar did not go down that road.
Wow.
She looked at the places that God brought her, even in the hospitals. As a patient, she would turn that around and become a light to somebody else, and it just gave her such extreme joy and happiness and hope that I think that's an example that we could all learn from.
That's God's heart, isn't it? If it's
It
important to you, it's important to Him. And if it's something you're struggling with, He's right there to help you, carry you through it. So I want to go back to something you just said. Who is Steve 2.0? Do you still have, is Hope Through the Storm Ministry? Where is that now?
Yeah, so that, we kept that going, but the last few years we just haven't been able to do anything with it because I was having to be so focused. So we just kind of left the website with all of our resources, and videos from the Hope Conferences are on there. You can watch Tony Campolo speak and Laura and all these people, and it's wonderful. But people had asked me, even at the memorial service, are you going to keep Hope Through the Storm going? And I said, I think so. I just have to spend some time with God on it. And so on these walks at Lake Michigan, He's kind of revealed to me that definitely it's time to do another Hope Conference when things settle down in this whole pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'll bring, grief into it, but not in the way people think. I'm able to say that I am able to grieve with hope. I know where Shar is. That's enormously comforting to me. But God is also saying to me that, Steve, you struggled this last time so much that you've been angry with me. I was angry with him at times.
Sure.
Like, can you just give the girl a break?
Yeah, right, yeah.
And so finally, He kind of revealed to me and said, you know what, Steve, this book is the purpose that Shar had to go through this last year.
Wow.
And so by sharing it, I have no interest in worrying about making money from it. I'm going to give any proceeds, to one of Shar's favorite causes, which was Compassion International.
Oh, awesome.
She sponsored 2 children, which we do now, and so, my biggest interest is that this is a mission now that He's given me, and I think there's people out there who really could use a message like this in their lives, who maybe have lost all hope, who are going through something, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a physical illness. It could be anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think Shar's example in here, and ultimately you see God's nearness in our lives through this book. You see the power of God displayed in this book through all these stories, just heartfelt, real stories of what we went through. And I think that's what He's put on my heart to say, Steve, this is a way to share the gospel.
Yeah.
This is a way to share who I am with the world, and hopefully draw people to Him to help them in their lives.
The book is Shar's Gift. The author is Steve Harriman. I'm guessing that we can get this wherever we can buy books, right? Amazon and all of them,
yes,
right?
There is an easy way just to get to those links. I have a website, just sharsgift.com.
Great.
And they can get to actually read the first 2 chapters there if they're interested to know more and learn more about the story.
So awesome. Steve, thank you so much for all you're bringing to our community.
Thank you, Susie. I appreciate the opportunity to share.